security is one of the key preconditions for the population's psychological resilience to crisis. Ladies and gentlemen, the Finnish comprehensive security concept has deep, almost a century-long roots in history. It is originally based on total defense arrangements, from which it has been extended to cover all other aspects of security as well. The concept is described in the security strategy for society adopted as a government resolution earlier this year. Purpose of the strategy is to provide all actors, not only authorities, with a common framework for implementing security activities from their own perspectives. Comprehensive security in Finland forms the foundation of resilience of the society. In the concept, the vital functions of society are taken care in collaboration between authorities, business community, non-governmental organizations and individual citizens in all circumstances and at all levels. The basis is the arrangements and legislation in so-called normal conditions that we are living at the moment. 7 vital functions of society form the core of implementing comprehensive security. They serve as the foundation for planning practical tasks and responsibilities. These deeply interlinked corners of the diamond are critical for the functioning of society and are subject to various threats. Leadership is a function that enables actors to effectively coordinate and implement measures related to preparedness and response. Finland operates in a networked world in which security measures are also embedded with a broader international context, including European Union and other international organizations. The goal of maintaining defense capability is to deter the use of military force and the threat thereof. If necessary, military threats against Finland will be countered by using military force jointly with our NATO allies. Internal security refers to the capability to prevent criminal activities, accidents, environmental damage, and other similar threats targeting Finland and its population, as well as to manage their consequences. Securing the functioning of economy, infrastructure, and security of supply provides the funding and other resources necessary to maintain the vital functions. The population's well-being is secured by maintaining the central basic services which promote the population's ability to cope independently in all circumstances. And psychological resilience refers to the ability of individuals, communities, and society to withstand the stress caused by crisis situations and to recover from their impacts. In Finland, we rely on a 360-degree approach to the threat spectrum, where the potential threats may stem from human actions, technological developments, or natural causes covering the operational domains. Our national risk assessment, which is frequently updated based on European Union civil protection mechanism, lays down the basis for the security activities. Assessing risks to threats provides grounds for preparedness and response. In the recent years, we have all gained a lot of experience of extensive hybrid influencing. We have been targeted, for example, by damaging underborder infrastructure, instrumentalizing migration, airspace violations, GPS jamming, cyber attacks, and continuous information influencing. Russia's brutal and unlawful invasion of Ukraine has shown that there is no hesitation in using military means extensively against the entire civil society as the aggressor promotes its selfish purposes. In the time we are currently living, preparedness for military threats is particularly important. Securing the vital functions of society requires not only preparedness but response as well. Preparedness reduces the likelihood of threats realizing and promotes society's readiness to face them. Preparedness is based on response requirements. Response, on the other hand, minimizes the impacts of realized threats and promotes the recovery of the vital functions of society. Response readiness stems from preparedness. The characteristics of preparedness and response are different. Preparedness is an ongoing activity that comprehensively considers threats. The goal is to achieve readiness to act. Response is limited in duration, focuses on threats at hand at any given time, and applies the capability achieved through preparedness. Securing the vital functions of the Finnish society in practice is based on totally 56 strategic tasks. The strategic tasks are sets of duties based on legislation, strengthened through contracts and complemented by voluntary activities. As you can see on this all too busy slide, responsibility for almost all tasks has been assigned to different ministries who manage, supervise, coordinate and steer preparedness and response in the respective sectors in accordance with the Emergency Powers Act and sector-specific legislation. When examining the whole of strategic tasks, it is important to recognize that defense is only one, but of course an extremely important part of our security solution. Only 2 of the tasks are defense-related, and the remaining 54 focus on other sectors of society. They are all needed to safeguard our society and to maintain its basic services in various disruptions and crises, including war. One of the strengths of the Finnish comprehensive security concept is that it covers all sectors and levels of society. The actors in public administration, business community, and civil society form networks of comprehensive security that apply common principles and operate at different levels of society. Information exchange, setting of shared objectives, and a commitment to collaboration between the international, national, regional, local, and finally individual levels build a foundation for security in our society. The flexibility and continuity of working together between different sectors and levels of society are among the basic requirements of strengthening resilience. In Finland, everyone has right to live in safe and secure society. This perspective also emphasizes the functional capacity of individuals based on the well-being of the body and the mind as a key factor of security. Individuals should maintain sufficient physical, psychological, mental and ethical ability to act. In addition, it is important to identify the factors that may endanger them and to prepare for these in advance and take determined action in response. Fundamentally, it is all about individual security attitude and willingness to participate in safeguarding the society. The aim of the security strategy for society is to provide everyone with a common framework for implementing comprehensive security from their own perspectives. This is the most important sentence in our renewed strategy. It contains a message for all of us. Our strategy as such is ultimately just the concept that describes our mission. To implement it, we need constant practical actions that reflect our passion. Moving from the concept to practice requires both contextualization, and concretization. So we all need to set comprehensive security within our own frameworks, identify the diamond of our own work, family, or other community, to recognize the dangers that lie in it and understand what they can cause us, to think in advance about what to do in situations where our most important one is threatened, and in particular, to recognize and acknowledge what is still lacking. The security capability gaps identified provide a good basis for our practical preparedness work. Unfortunately, preparedness requires always resources. Successful building of security requires systematic and long-term approach so that operating methods, organization, training, material, leadership, and management, personnel, infrastructure, and information can be integrated in a balanced and suitable set of capabilities, reinforced by regular joint exercises. Paperwork alone is not enough to build resilience to crises. In addition to it, continuous investments are required. Ladies and gentlemen, comprehensive security concerns us all. This is the basic idea of Finnish society's crisis resilience summed up in one sentence. With these words, I thank you for your interest and conclude my presentation and ready to discuss this topic with you. Thank you very much.
So thank you so much for your presentation. The first question would be, what is a lesson that we can take from Ukraine and apply to the Baltic states when it comes to society and resilience immediately? What would you say?
Thank you very much. Of course, we all have been able to receive lessons identified and also been able to learn from them. I'm not pointing out any sector-specific, but highlighting two horizontal findings that we see extremely important in Finland. First is that in the times of crisis, it's extremely important to be able to enable normal life conditions as long as possible. So the school system has to work also in case of war. That you have to take care of the healthcare system, and you have to be able to take part in your hobbies as much as possible. So the basic life elements cannot be stopped in the cases of the most significant crises. And maybe the second lesson I would like to highlight is that as we can all observe in Ukraine, Russia is trying to influence to entire society. It's not war fighting between the forces only, but Russia is using, without no hesitation, all possible indirect means to make the psychological resilience of the population to collapse by, for example, influencing the electricity infrastructure.
And if we were to flip that question around, what do you think is a lesson that the Baltic state can take from the Finnish model that you presented today when it comes to the resilience of society and whatnot?
First of all, I have to say that every society is different, so I'm not trying to sell the Finnish concept, but to share our own solutions and the elements related to it. It's extremely important that each of us evaluate each other's solutions and examines if there is something that could be adapted to our own solutions. So we are very proud on that fact that we have a solution that involves everyone. So that brings the population together and integrates the cohesion of the society. So the whole of society approach is one. And then maybe what I would like to highlight is that our solution takes into account all potential threats. I understand very well that in the times we are living at the moment, the military threats are very visible and has to be taken seriously. But what I would like to highlight that if you take a little bit distance to the timeline and start evaluating it, it's also extremely important that you keep in mind that there are also different types of other crises that we have met in the past and can meet in the future. For example, caused by the climate change that is coming there.
Thank you very much. Thanks again to Mr. Korvola. Please give it up for his presentation.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. And up next, we already have our third panel of the day, Beyond the Suwalki Corridor, Maritime Lifelines for Baltic Defense. So I'm going to ask you to please welcome to the stage the Chief of the Norwegian Joint Headquarters of the Norwegian Armed Forces, Vice Admiral Rune Andersen, Colonel Peter Nielsen, former commander of the NATO Force Integration Unit of Lithuania, and last but not least, Captain Dr. Bartlomiej Patsetsky. So sorry, my Canadian accent is taking over again. The Vice Director for Science at the Polish Naval Academy. This is going to be moderated by Alexander Olek, the Editor-in-Chief of Defense 24. So please give it up for our panelists.
Okay.
Where you are?
Sit. You in the middle.
Okay.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. You already know names and the position of our marvelous experts, but for sure in the Google or ChatGPT you can find some of answers. However, you will not find the most interesting things in Google because they provide you with the best answers. So I'm Dr. Alexander Olek, and I would like to start at the beginning with adding some fire to this discussion. So the very first question will be only with answer yes or no. So starting with Vice Admiral, the Russian Federation will attack NATO through the Suwalki Gap. Yes or no?
No.
Please, next, Captain. Yes or no? No, maybe, sorry.
No, I'm a PhD.
Okay.
When I was conducting my PhD thesis, my former commander, Admiral, said, please do the PhD, because if you are a soldier, you have only answers, yes or no. After conferring a PhD diploma, you have a third answer, I doubt.
Okay, the third one?
No.
No. Okay, we have the very first beginning answers, and I wanted to start with that because the title is Beyond the Suwalki Corridor, and we have this maritime lifelines for the Baltic defense. And it's crucial to us because as a representative of Poland, and today I'm happy as a researcher because if you already know probably, we had a situation in Poland when someone was trying to blow up railway tracks in Poland today. It wasn't the first time, it was like dozens already. So for Poland, it's crucial to have a support from partners. So, starting with you, Vice Admiral, what are, from your perspective, Norway, Poland, Suwalki Gap, the main challenges with regards to securing maritime lines of communication, but also having in mind that Suwalki Gap is one thing, but Norway sees more. You see the Barents Sea, you also see the Arctic region. What is your opinion about those challenges as right now?
The challenges, and I'm going to zoom out a little bit. I conduct operations, as you say, in the Atlantic and the Barents Sea. It's a region of geopolitical tension, of a red and blue dynamic. And I'd like to just start by offering a thought. So when we're in the Baltic or in Finland or in Poland, you are preparing to defend a border, and it's really a binary thing. It's there, and it needs to be defended. While operating in the high north, in the Baltic, and in the Barents Sea, you have large areas of international waters and airspace, and it has, since the beginning of the Cold War, been utilized between great powers to signal, to deter, and to operate continuously in the vicinity of each other. That has been there for a long time. It has only changed character. And what we're seeing now is a high operational tempo, particularly in the underwater domain, in order to make sure we have strategic control and dominance of the Atlantic, because that is vital to not only defending the Baltics, but indeed defending Europe.
Do you feel that Russia is carrying out at the same time operations in Arctic and here in the Baltic Sea? Do you feel that it's like some kind of pattern?
There are patterns, but there's also differences. So Norway has a border to Russia, which is relatively small. It's about 200 kilometers. But it's only a few kilometers from their center of gravity, their nuclear bases. The whole nuclear triad is located very close to that, and that gives character to the operational environment. This is a sensitive area, as seen from Russia. It's an area where they traditionally have not sought attention. But we have seen now over the last years that they're deploying with the new and sophisticated submarines in a way that also threatens Western strategic targets. So it's also an area which is hugely important to countries like the US, the UK, France, and other Atlantic nations. And that gives flavor to the increased operational tempo in the high north.
Thank you, Admiral. Captain Pączek, we talked a lot about Norway and also Western partners, but here, with regards to the Baltic states and Poland, we have to admit that we have limited capacity, military capacity of our naval forces. So, from your perspective, which technological innovations with regards to maritime logistics we could enhance, mainly for Baltic Sea, and what would happen if, for instance, the Suwałki Gap would compromise?
The question is actually wider than it sounds in your wording, because this is not only about the logistics, it is also about the operational art. And the topic of operational art and the classical attitude towards the role of the Navy has already been mentioned in our morning panels. I'll start from that point that even the wording that we've seen tomorrow morning, the NATO lake, from my perspective, is tragic in consequences. It, on one hand, suggests that we may be able to fully control the sea, which is not true. And on the other hand, it somehow creates the illusion of security in the area. But coming to your question and possible technical or innovative attitude towards Baltic, I've noted, at least during these panels, 3 areas that we may touch. Firstly, the improving of operational robustness of our forces. And meaning robustness, I can remind such a wording like resilience, agility, flexibility in conducting the operations in a modern way and forecasting new, not already identified threats. Second, finding the way to minimizing risks in the area in multiple domains: economic risks, political, environmental, and any other. And last but not least, enlargement of civil-military cooperation, anything which fits into dual-use technologies in military movement in civilian harbors. But being more precise and going into details, I may at least mention few technologies, evolving technologies, or the ones that are already in development phases, which we may focus on. And quite obvious, it would be the first point, is the development of unmanned technologies. Not only in the air domain, which is visible in Ukraine conflict, for example, but also in maritime domain. Both surface and underwater vehicles that may conduct operations, not only being remotely operated by human, but also conduct conduct fully autonomous missions. And we do have such experiences in hydrography, but we do not have that many experiences with offensive use of those vehicles. Second point, investing in smart ports, smart harbors, building the information environment, environment of all the parties involved in maritime transport, not only civilian harbors, but also military units, creating what is in military called a net-centric attitude, somehow building a net centricity between civilian authorities and military forces. Third, investing in new technologies concerning the energy efficiency. We are trying to build new drones, but the maritime domain, in my opinion, is much more difficult to operate than the air domain. To keep the vessels, surface or underwater ones, going in a long sea trial, we need an efficient energy sources. Another point, data analysis capabilities. Not only gathering the data, creating another lake, data lakes, that create a big data sources, but to effectively analyze it. AI will be helpful, will be definitely helpful, so investing in AI and data analysis is also important. Even from NATO perspective, we are speaking about maritime domain awareness in multiple approaches. I tried to count all the systems that already exist in the Baltic area on national, bilateral, and multilateral levels. There are numbers of systems, not necessarily interconnected, to create maritime domain awareness that would be available to all parties. From a purely, maybe not security, but safety of vessels, having in mind the Russian activities connected with GPS jamming, GPS spoofing, communication targeting, we may think about investing in collision avoidance systems or resilient communications. Just to summarize, I know that all these technologies, inventive technologies that may be introduced into force, require assets. So there are a number of challenges, starting from the legal ones, how to construct the legal basis for interconnectivity between parties, not only the Baltic area. Second, cost and gross domestic product involvement. Poland is said to be one of the leading countries here in Europe when it comes to enlarging the investments in defense from our GDP, reaching the 5%. Actually, it is 3.5 to military and 1.5 to civilian and crisis response assets. However, even in Poland, we still think, how long can we keep it up on that level? Being an academic and representing the Polish Naval Academy responsible for training the future cadets, another challenge is to prepare skillful, well-trained crews for the vessels, operators for unmanned systems. I talked to one of generals, wing commanders of our air forces. He asked me a tricky question: how many jet fighters we have in Polish armed forces? I counted the vessels, and that was not the answer. The answer was, we don't have that many as we have the vessels. We have that many as we have pilots. And from our perspective, training of a young officer for future corvette, frigate, any other vessel, takes at least 5 years. There is a modernization program connected with building 3 new frigates for Polish Navy. The first one should be delivered in 2029, 2030, and 2031, the third one of a series. We already now started training crews for the first frigate that will be delivered in 2029. And believe me, it is a huge challenge, because you can't fill the frigate only with fresh officers. You need already experienced one. And last but not least, cybersecurity domain, which is also important. I will stop here,
yeah,
because,
we'll come back to this.
Because you will have much more questions later on, I'm pretty sure.
For sure, many questions pop up in my head as well. for our audience. But I would like to just ask about one thing you mentioned, those maritime drones. A few minutes ago, President Zelensky, President Macron, they participated at a forum focused on drones, and France and Ukraine signed a bilateral agreement, except also for signing another agreement buying 100 Rafales, but we'll leave that. So question is, Poland, Latvia, Lithuania, and Estonia, perhaps it's high time for those countries to use their startups, knowledge, manpower to focus on maritime drones. Do we have capabilities to do that?
Yes, we definitely do. But we are highly overwhelmed by commercial companies, not only Europeans, but coming from all over the world, that are ready to deliver the technology. It is maybe a tricky judgment, and it's not the judgment of the Polish Naval Academy. It's my personal thought that investing only in ready-to-buy assets is a mistake. We should more concentrate on developing own capabilities, local, regional, or even national, to be ready to sustain the long-term, not only development, but delivery program of unmanned vehicles of any types, surface, subsurface, or flying ones. Buying the ready commercials off the shelf is not the way we should go. In particular, every year in Poland, in Kielce, we hold an international exhibition of defense technologies. Believe me, I will visit the exhibition year by year over the last 10 years. This year, the exhibition was overwhelmed by unmanned technologies, by companies coming from states we never saw in the exhibition years before. Coming from South America, North America, nearly all continents, having ready solutions, selling drones in their wording, operationally checked and confirmed the capabilities. From our perspective, and it already happens in Polish Armed Forces, is a development of a dedicated military unit responsible for testing new unmanned technologies and assess it against our needs. So that we don't buy what is available, we rather buy what we have, what we want to use.
We have to only add that the Russian Federation already has created a separate armed force focused only on drones. But now to Colonel Nielsen. First of all, congratulations for joining the dark side of being retired colonel. So now you can tell all the truth about the challenges. So you are former commander, NATO Force Integration Unit Lithuania. Simply saying, what lessons from NATO force integrations in the Baltic states can be applied simply to improve coordinations of maritime operations only or during crisis?
First, I would like to say that I don't think the Lithuanian railroad really is the dark side, but it's I find it a very bright experience working there. But then the second point, allow me to just touch initially on and be specific on how I see the operational background here. So because I think we can talk about a lot of generic things, but I think it's important that we understand the reality, what will happen. Because as you asked about the Suwałki corridor, if Russia will attack through that. So Russia doesn't really need to attack through the Suwałki corridor in order to block it. It can be blocked by indirect fire, by drones. We've seen that in Ukraine, where they have the capacity to go beyond the normal direct fire. So I think it would be stupid of us to count on getting any supplies through the Suwałki corridor after the first shot has been fired. And what does that mean? That means that when that corridor is cut, then the Baltic countries, the 3B countries, will be transformed into an island, meaning that it needs to get the supplies brought in through over the Baltic Sea. The Baltic Sea can be seen as a big, huge lake, which is kind of controlled by enemy artillery from the Suwałki, from the Kaliningrad area, and of course we need to take that out. And I know there's a briefing later today on the A2AD bubble or that concept, and I think that's a very interesting thing, because that bubble, as long as that is in existence, we will not be able to fly or sail supplies into the island of the 3Bs. Meaning that it has to have priorities to defeat this bubble, and that bubble is not just missiles in the air; it's also coastal missiles, so preventing the ships from sailing the supplies in. So we need to have that degraded to a sufficiently low level before we can start sailing convoys or ships in with the supplies and the reinforcements that needs to come in. So this is really important that we understand this, because there are simply limits to how much supplies that can be pre-stocked in the 3Bs, and it shouldn't be, and there's also not space for that. So we need to have something here sufficiently, what makes sense, and then the rest needs to be stocked in deeper Europe, and then be sailed in when the A2AD bubble and the coastal missiles are gone. So this concept of being kind of fighting on our own until the sea lines of communications are reopened, I think this is very important that we understand this, and the whole of the maritime community understand this, that if we do not get supplies into the Baltic after a certain number of days, then the battle is lost here in the Baltic, and then the national countries will resort to partisan warfare as they have done before. So this is important, and we need probably to take risk in order to do this and be able to fight our way from Sweden and deeper Europe, the Danish Strait, into the Baltic area and reach Klaipėda, Liepāja, Ventspils and Riga harbors, unload the ferries, and then get the ammunition forward through rails and trucks to the front line. So I think this is first of all, I think, very important for us to understand that this is needed. But luckily, we have Sweden and Finland, because that changed it totally. So we don't need a carrier group, and it can't be. There's no space for a carrier in the Baltic Sea, but we have Gotland. And we have Bornholm, unsinkable carriers already in form of these islands that can support the fight. And the present Chief Defence Staff of Lithuanian Defence Staff told me when he was commander of the Lithuanian Navy that Gotland is actually closer to Klaipėda than Vilnius is to Klaipėda, which makes you think a bit also. So it's so nice to have that huge island there where the ships can hide behind, and then we can have our own bubble over that also, and then sail the reinforcements and the supplies into the Baltic. So that's the situation as I see it. And what I think could be learned, I think we all need to talk to each other. I think the tendency to do silo planning is something that is within all bureaucracies and also within the multinational planning. I've seen it, and I think it's just there, and we need to do what we can in order to avoid that, so that we get this understanding about the reality within the other domains. So it's not just the Air Force, it's not just the land forces, it's not just the maritime, but how do we work together, and what is the situation in the other domains? And what is then the consequences for us in our domain, and how do we work together in order to get the best out of this, to get the multi-domain approach, as was mentioned here. So I think the more we can engage, the NFIU is really about engagement, and also, of course, making sure that we get the planning and ready for the reinforcements and the supplies to get into Lithuania. It is about engagement, and I think this is good within the different domains.
To briefly follow up with regards to maritime domain, do you think that we, for a quite period, completely forget about maritime domain? We were extremely focused on land domain, and eastern flank was only about land. Let's buy more tanks, more air defense, and then Russia started to behave completely different, was carrying out hybrid attacks, then cutting cables. So now somehow we have maritime domain and we are trying to keep up.
No, but I think we should look at differentiate between the countries. So I think the frontline nation is doing the right thing by focusing on creating a land-heavy defense. Because I mean, this is, as I see it, what is most important for the frontline nations. There should be a huge mobilization army, and the Finnish presentation that we heard before. I mean. The Finns, when they mobilize 250,000 soldiers with 750,000 in reserve behind that, that is amazing. And this is where we can make our frontline countries indigestible if we can do that. And then, of course, we have, I don't know, Lithuania is looking at it to have there need to be some patrol boats and then counter mines capacities, because we need to have, as I said, the harbors will be essential for us to get the supplies through. So we need to have them operating, and luckily there are a number of harbors where we can use this. And then the deeper Europe countries can look into provide more navy-heavy armed forces so that they can. I mean, we need to destroy the Russian Baltic fleet, and I think we can do that. These colleagues knows more about this, of course, but the submarines might be an issue that takes a bit longer time, but I'm sure we can do it. And then just like a burden sharing thing of these tasks.
You mentioned, Colonel, military domain, so I have to ask Admiral about the military domain, especially about Royal Norwegian Navy. So how your Navy assess the current risk and what measures are being simply implemented to effectively protect undersea critical infrastructure? And also, secondly, what kind of line of communication do you see between Baltic and North Seas?
So first of all, the Baltic Sea, the Baltic region, is inevitably connected to the security situation in the high north. So if you sit in Moscow, then this is all the westerly direction. It's one strategic direction, and there's no situation where you will have a conflict in the Baltics which will not also affect the high north significantly. So these are interconnected regions, but there are two different operational environments. So we are. So there are several things in that question. I'll get back to the critical infrastructure. But first of all, the inclusion of Sweden and Finland in NATO has done a lot to our defense planning, and it has introduced the idea about Norway as an essential hub together with Sweden for that whole flow of military power that needs to deploy into this region. And that goes for basing, air basing, joint logistic networks, etc. That is now planned and developed in order to enable allied operation in this region. And when it comes to the Baltic, I strongly believe that a war between NATO and Russia will be very different from what we see in Ukraine today. And I strongly believe that we need to continue to prioritize what suits us best, and that's to use our overwhelming ability to deliver power from a distance in a synchronized and organized manner, which none of the parties in the Ukraine war actually are able to do. So to focus on our contribution as nations in the collective effort that NATO can perform in times of war in order to deliver overwhelming power. And I strongly think that a war with Russia in this region, Kaliningrad would be the first target, and it's well within our means to dismantle the A2AD system around Kaliningrad. And we do that, we train that regularly in Norway with US, UK, and others in a very, very, very high-tech, very sophisticated way in order to be ready to do that at the very first aggression from Russia. And it's very transferable to the Kaliningrad problem. So this is a priority for us. Priority to develop what's called MDO today, which means inclusion of strategic air, carrier strike, maritime long-range precision strike, together with our special forces operating in the deep, and also with an increased inclusion of satellite-based sensors. Hugely important for us to have a proper response to Russian aggression, but also what I think is really deterrence is to show that, to demonstrate that in exercises and activities, which are conducted regularly in the Atlantic theater. So if succeeding on that, and that's why I answered no on the Suwalski Gap, and I know we will succeed on that, and I know that if we get our things together, are a much stronger military power than Russia. Then the rest is hybrid. Then the rest is asymmetric, which will be the preferred way for Russia to continue to confront the West and to destabilize the West. And we should plan for even more creativity and risk-taking from Russia in staging that hybrid threat against the West. And then underwater infrastructure is part of that. So if I can say a few words on that as well.
Yes, please, because I wanted to follow up, and you touched, the topic of, striking Kaliningrad Oblast. It's honey to my ears. So yeah, please.
So, well, I think anything else than NATO dominating the Baltic is wrong. I mean, that of course that should be our ambition. But let's get back to that. Now on critical infrastructure. So the cables and the Nord Stream pipeline are disturbing incidents. But we are concerned about the fact that we deliver 30% of Europe's gas from the North Sea, from the Norwegian sector in the North Sea, which has a strategic importance. So we have intensified our surveillance and protection of that. And there's a lot to say about that, but I'll just focus on one thing, and that is perhaps the most important thing is to integrate properly with the industries. So the offshore industries have more autonomous underwater vehicles and more sophisticated equipment than any navy probably ever will have in operating on the seabed. So our key to success has been to integrate properly with the industry, working in each other's headquarters at a classified level, and conducting a continuous surveillance operation on the seabed with a vast amount of resources that they have, but utilizing them on the background of the knowledge that we have. So that's my key point really. I don't see a pure military response to a problem like that. It has to be a comprehensive response.
Thank you very much. Yeah, we have to play with some kind of, rule book that we develop every time. When 3 jets enter our, air territory, we are trying to adjust. When we have drones, we are trying to adjust. So 100% I follow up and I support your statement. Kapitan Pączek, what is your perspective with regards to not only developing personnel, because you touch upon very difficult topic. Poland would like to have 300,000 soldiers, unbelievable. But what about, buying more weapons? Simply saying, we will be choosing within the next few weeks submarines. Do you think that all Baltic states, including Poland, should have own submarines? I don't know, perhaps Lithuania and Estonia, or Lithuania, Latvia could buy as 2 countries submarine. What is your stance on that?
It's not easy question. It's a tricky
I know.
one, of course, but it's the goal of the panel. My opinion is no. Simply answer no. Not every Baltic NATO member should have submarine. But as a NATO as a whole, we do need them to keep a high level of deterrence. That is the cheapest and most efficient way to deter Russia having submarines in the area. With a small amount of effort, you can engage so many opponents' forces to search for, to conduct the anti-submarine warfare, that it is not, it won't be cost effective from the Russia perspective. Current Polish view on the subs is actually tragic because we have already retired all of our Common class subs. The only remaining in the fleet is an old Soviet type Kilo class operating in the Navy. To be honest, and it is my personal judgment, Poland has lost the capabilities in underwater operations with submarines due to some neglectance, due to some postponed programs. We have not the crews ready to operate the modern top-class submarines. We are not starting from scratch because we still may be able to create the core crew based on already experienced officers or experienced crews, but it is a challenge for the Naval Academy, being the main training facility in Poland, to prepare the future crew. And it brings a broader question: how should we evolve as a Naval Academy and other academies in the NATO states when it comes to preparing new personnel for future operations? Historically, all the naval academies, and I'm talking about the academies we cooperate with, like French École Navale, German Marine Schule or Bulgarian Academy, we focus on tactical and operational level of training. On tactical level, we were teaching or training officers through the deck or mechanical engineering perspective. So we train the future vessel commander capable of using modern warfare to conduct operation according to predefined tactics, and on the other hand, the mechanical engineer. But today, it is much too narrow way of thinking. That's why the naval academies, not only ours, but also of other states, we've included a new curricula to our programs, like cybersecurity officers, like logistic officers, and I'm talking general logistics, not only the maritime logistics. We invest in mechatronics, in IT technologies. Those are the new areas that we have to bring as a package of knowledge, capabilities to future officers. We are not only training the deck operator, we have to broaden the picture for the officer to be to a multi-domain perspective. Multi-domain wording has already appeared on that stage. Another case is also developing a new operational art and develop new doctrines. Therefore, for example, and I will advertise a little bit, the Polish Naval Academy has over last years established 2 think tanks in our academy. First is Maritime Cyber Security Center that focuses on not only hostile but general activities, defensive and offensive in the cyber domain, and cooperates directly with Cyber Command of Polish Armed Forces. And the second think tank is a strategic maritime security center that is led by the former chief of National Security Bureau, which brings us, the Navy, close to a political governmental level of decision making and the way of thinking that has to be brought to the academies, to future personnel.
Thank you. As we are here today, researchers, experts, practitioners, politicians, it's crucial to me. That's why I'm very glad that we are meeting today. Also, dear audience, there is different banners you can scan and ask questions. And now I will rely on your questions. So, Colonel, the questions from the audience. Beyond the Suwałki corridor, will Rail Baltica, also via Carpathia, via Baltica, change the safety situation? Do you believe in those kind of projects?
Well, I think the Rail Baltica is more related to a peacetime situation, to be honest, because, as I said, when the Suwałki corridor will be closed, then Rail Baltica will also be closed. There will be an internal rail running north-south within the Baltics that can have a role to play in relocating the supplies within the 3B countries. But that can probably be handled also by the present infrastructure, rail infrastructure, but at least it's good to have some dual capacities or extra resilience built into it. So I think it can, internally, yes, it will have a task, but it's more in the initial phase to have this rapid build-up. We will run out of time in the build-up. So, I mean, we will have a German division coming in, either by ships or by the Rail Baltica or whatever rail is available, and supplies with that division, and maybe a NATO division coming in also somewhere in the Baltic. So there's a huge amount of forces here and related logistics that will come in. So I think there's a role to play in the initial phase, definitely, but also after it's cut within the 3Bs. Yeah.
Okay, follow up to your last answer. You mentioned Finland. I will stick to that. You know, they have numerous shelters and bunkers. So, as for now, the Baltic states, Poland, should we plan all of future investments with regard to military domain? So, when we start to build something, there's always, you know, back in our minds that it should have this military aspect.
Yeah. I think there's been some great speakers before here really emphasizing the whole of society approach, and this is what we need. The military will be supported by the rest of society. That is the construct where we shift to in a wartime, but we cannot win the war with the military alone without the support of the rest of society. So that needs to be, that role, and this actually boils down to every single person of you also, is if you don't have a role within the military government or the uniform part or Red Cross or somewhere else, I would advise you to go find a role for yourself to support this war, because the more indigestible we can make ourselves, the more we can make ourselves like Finland, where I refer to this all the time because it's so interesting. The more we will lower the risk of war happening here. I mean, it's that simple. So we just need everyone to take this in, grab our responsibility, find our role in this, and then we support it. And it is not just the military; it's the whole of society.
Admiral Anderson, again, your last statement, and probably someone from the audience heard it. So questions from the audience: should we act as Russia and organize hybrid operations on Russia territory? I will add something. You mentioned exercises, because you know Russia is carrying out a lot of hybrid activities. What should be our answer or reaction? Should we probably use Norwegian Navy and carry out those exercises as close as possible to the Russian Federation border or Navy zone? Should we enter and come back, re-enter? What is your stance on that?
I think we as Western democracies has a stronger appreciation of international law than Russia, and will not enter into the same approach as them when it comes to hybrid operations. I think we need to be very clear and precise in the way we demonstrate our cohesion and our ability to conduct large-scale joint combined operations. And I think there has been good efforts to strengthen that, but that will be the path as we move ahead, is to, as countries are investing and strengthening their militaries, the other element of that is to strengthen the way we operate together. So to conduct clear demonstration of our ability to act with precision and with determination in early phases of conflict is deterrence. I particularly conduct operations, as I said, in an area which is particularly sensitive, because it is the highest concentration of nuclear weapons in the world, and there is a long history here of balancing how we are portraying our strength together with allies. And we're lucky, but it's a reality that this region that I'm operating in is also of very high relevance to the other nuclear nations in NATO, the US, UK, and France in particular. So we operate with strength together, but we also make sure that we don't create any misunderstandings and get unintended escalation in this particular region. So I think to continue to find ways to balance strength against unintended escalation risks is important. And for the hybrid, continue to build resilience, continue to make sure that we can attribute effectively, and make sure that we deny them operational freedom also in the hybrid sphere, really.
Can we believe that all NATO countries from the eastern and north flank would carry out all actions needed together? Do we believe in that?
Yeah, I believe in that. So I believe in the strength of those partnerships, and there is this perhaps this elephant in the room now with reshift or balancing of U.S. foreign policies and priorities. That's probably behind the lines in your So in the Atlantic, security problem is very much also a U.S. security problem. So the shortest route from Russia to the U.S. is across the Arctic. Coming out of the Arctic are offensive capabilities operated from Russia against the east coast of the U.S. So we see a determination and a continuity in U.S. engagement in the security of the Atlantic, which is, as I said initially, important not only for countries like Norway, but it's really important for the entire alliance, including the Baltic, that we maintain superiority in that transatlantic sphere.
Thank you. Rector Pączek, keep it like 2-3 minutes. We'll be finishing soon. So, very important question about, maritime mines. The Russian Federation has been using that. How do we perceive our current activity, perhaps our current actions? Should we be afraid of, the Russian Federation using this methodology in the Baltic Sea?
Starting from the geography of Baltic Sea, we already had historically many proofs that the Baltic is very sensitive to mining operations. Therefore, we have to, and we should, and we do, first prepare and then have fully operational mine countermeasure forces. Not only Baltic states, but also Poland introduces new vessels, for example, new mine destroyers that are capable of clearing sea lines of communication, keeping them ready for sailing, let's say, and clearing the area from mines. Of course, we may use them also offensively. Not only defensive part is important, but also offensive part. Therefore, we are focusing, for example, in the research and development area, in developing new system for measuring the signatures of foreign vessels in multiple physics fields, like hydrodynamic field, electromagnetic field, magnetic hydroacoustic field, to create a huge database of opponents' vessels being identified by their characteristics. Due to the shallow waters of Baltic, we can presume that our access to Gulf of Finland, the Finnish Gulf, will be totally limited. Again, access to Gulf of Gdańsk, it is maybe more difficult because depths are higher, but still doable. Therefore, developing the fleet, the vessels of mine countermeasure flotilla is important, but also developing unmanned technologies. One of the examples are the research conducted in our academy to prepare an underwater vehicle capable of destroying mines without destruction of the vehicle itself. It is currently the program, R&D program financed by our government. We are reaching the demonstrator level, but soon we'll be ready to present the ready product. So underwater unmanned technologies, swarming technologies. Now, building a highly capable underwater vehicle is expensive. So our idea that we are developing in this mine countermeasures area is to develop a swarm of underwater vehicles. When the mother vessels is well equipped, it means expensive, and is followed by a number of smaller underwater vehicles operating half autonomously, and in the last stage conducting a suicidal mission to destroy the mine, underwater mine, or even vessels, surface vessels of the opponent.
It sounds very promising. Yeah. So last word to Colin Nielsen. Previous speaker mentioned government. So what about the most critical bureaucratic procedural obstacles do you see with regards to, rapid deployment, with regards to NATO? Do you see any challenges, to fasten the process if we have simply a crisis?
Well, we heard the first speaker this morning, Kubelius, saying this EU package that would be published this week. So it'll be interesting looking into this, because we should be moving towards the what we call the military Schengen, where there's like we have more or less free movement across the borders. Now we should have that on the military side also, so we can do that, because there are just so many stupid bureaucratic rules still preventing the land forces to move across national borders, and we need to change that. And then I think we need to do some training on this also to make sure we can do that, and how it works, so we really get a feeling of a smooth transfer between nations. Yeah, that's probably, and then I think there's a lot of legal things that I'm not a legal expert, but I do think there's many legal and issues that the governments and the parliaments needs to look into in order to prepare, some that can be put in effect already now, but some needs to be prepared in packages, because I mean our decision-making process will be a target if something happens, so they will try to take out these people that will make these decisions, so we need to prepare it as smooth as possible, and we need to again to exercise this. How do we do this if some of the key persons are taken out? How can we still make these? Because I mean, nations are still sovereign countries, and they will insist on something still. But we need to have the mechanism, sufficient mechanism in place that we can make this smooth transition into wartime situation where we can move without where borders doesn't exist. It's just geography that's controlling us.
I promise organizers to be on time, so only one sentence at the end to sum up your statement. So please, Admiral, one sentence to sum up today's discussion from your side.
I think we're on a path to strengthening our deterrence, and it requires not only capabilities but also stronger integration, and that's also a comment to the last discussion here. Stronger integration between nations that are neighboring each other in order to make strong clusters within the alliance.
Thank you. Rector, please, Captain. One sentence.
To be short and in one sentence, two primary goals: enhance multi-domain awareness, maritime domain awareness, and at the same time deepen regional cooperation.
Please, Colonel.
We need to be honest, we need to move fast, and we need to look away from 100% solutions and be sufficient with 80%, and we need to look into alternatives that can be produced in mass and economically alongside traditional weapon systems.
Dear audience, I ask you for a huge round of applause for marvelous speakers.
Thank you bardzo.
Okay, to keep things going, up next we have another presentation, What Has Wartime Medicine in Ukraine Taught Us? And our speaker is Denis Surkov, Medical Course Director for the Tactical Medicine School of the Land Force Academy of the Ukrainian Armed Forces. So please let's welcome him to the stage. Thank you.
Hello to everybody. First of all, I would say that there is no conflict of interest. There is a brief glossary, but I think that the auditory is quite experienced and quite comprehensive. So I would start with some words about what is the biggest difference of the modern Russian-Ukrainian war with all the experience of NATO countries and all over the world for the last, I think, 80 years. First of all, let's say that most of last combat missions we can determine as the COIN or counter-insurgency campaigns, and it should be characterized by some words, if I would say, about the medical support. I would say that the COIN should be characterized by, first, the army has a good logistic. I mean that the evacuation chain of every single casualty is more or less okay. I would say that this is like a war of choice, so there is no dramatic limitations of resources, of the staff, and everything else. That medical personnel can operate in more or less safety condition, and the army can place the medical treatment facility more or less close to the front line. So what it means? It means that every single casualty of category Alpha could be moved to the MTF Role 1 during the golden hour, or even quicker. At the moment, we should talk about even the platinum half of an hour. And, you know, from the perspective of large-scale combat operations, we should say that this is not the, characteristics of Russian-Ukrainian war. This is characteristics of large-scale combat operation. Large-scale combat operation will mean that this is the war of necessity, and it doesn't mean that every single army will be in a strong position, and it means that it should be that there will be not proper logistic in both directions. I mean that the evacuation movement from the point of injury to the MTF, Role 1 or Role 2 will be at least complicated. The distance for safety of medical personnel should be enlarged. And it is about that it will be much more casualties a day. I mean that if we will compare the casualty flow rate in COIN and large-scale combat operation, we will say that in LISCO, you can have every single day the situation like a mezcal. And every single day, your medical service could be overloaded by casualty of different types. So the chain of survival by NATO armies at the moment looks like that. You see point of injury, tactical CCP, KSEVAC, ambulance exchange point, medevac, and Role 1. what we have at the moment in Ukraine. In Ukraine, it appears that the Geneva Convention is not effective, and the medical assets and medical teams and medical treatment facilities are primary target. So you can't use medical professionals as medical personnel in even medical evacuation teams because of danger to be hit. And it's clear that you will need to spend much more time to prepare medical professionals comparing with medical personnel, which you can train from non-medical personnel during the certain training courses. So the chain of survival in Ukraine more or less is looking like that, and as you can see, the evacuation time comparing to the coins will be enlarged dramatically. So the average time for category alpha patients will be approximately 6 to 8 hours in the best conditions. Sometimes it will take over 24 hours, even some days. But you need to clearly understand that human physiology will not wait, and the hemorrhagic shock started with bleeding will continue despite the pauses or problems with logistics. So, what are the possible ways? What should you be thinking about? First is, are your medical service and medical support of combat operations match the new reality with enlarged logistic of enlarged chain of survival, with huge number of the casualties, and the goal is to match the human physiology and your logistic and medical resupply. What I mean, if we will talk about damage control resuscitation, it means that we are not based on some certain ideas or some certain principles or procedures based on how we can imagine we will take medical care the best way. It's based on logistic. So, if you could be in time, I mean, if you could be in 1 hour with your category alpha patient, and you can move this category alpha patient to the role 1 MTF, everything looks more or less okay. If not, there are some other ways. Way number 1, you can extend your basic skills training for all the military personnel, starting with gun operators, with combat lifesavers, combat medics, and so on. The way number 2 is to provide finally the new approach for medical planning process. At the moment, in NATO armies, there is just one course for medical planning. I mean the medical planning procedure at the strategic level. Why so? Because all the missions, all the operations before Russian-Ukrainian wars, there were coins. And there were a complete air supremacy and something like that, and every single casualty could be picked up near a front line by helicopter and quickly moved to the role 1 or role 2 or role 3 MTF. If you understand that in perspective, you will be able to do the same, it's okay, you don't need to change anything. Based on Ukrainian experience, the crucial role of the medical planning is based on the tactical level of small units. And there is no, at the moment, medical planning process for the units of operational and tactical level in NATO countries. So, you should find the balance between priority for evacuation, priority for treatment and patient safety, and priority to the personal security. And you need to design the new approach, what to do in case of the front line will be not stable, because all the present procedures are based on that the front line is more or less stable and your logistic chains are unbroken. So, based on METTC and TLP procedures, we designed like a new approach. This is not new model, this is not new standard operation procedure, but this is new approach. How to provide the medical planning process at the level of small units or units of tactical level. And we named it CMPAC 3. It means casualty estimation, materials, personnel, environment, and C2 and communication. A couple of words about that. So the main question will be how to get the estimated casualty number during the operation and how to estimate the casualty flow rate with some specific casualty profiles. I mean the ratio between patients category Alpha, Bravo, and Charlie. And this is the most difficult question as for me, because at the moment it could be based on historical data, but there is no historical data for the large-scale combat operation for the last decades. Next question will be, if your capacity of your medical service will match the casualty flow rate, both with the casualty number and casualty profile. Materials. The materials could be based on, first, we have the standardized IFACs, we have the standardized TCCC bag for the squad level, we have the backpack for the combat medic based on TCCC. But you should clearly understand that TCCC is designed for the first 1 to 2 hours for the casualties category Alpha, not more. And the next question will be if these materials are okay with the new number of casualties, with new profile of casualties, as well as that TCCC is based on the stop the bleed idea, based on the modern ballistic weapons. But already we have a lot of cases of using from Russia sides thermobaric ammos as well as chemical weapons. And thermobaric weapons change the epidemiology of the injuries dramatically. Personnel. How to estimate the personnel? There are two ways. Way number one, This is what is going on with the present Ukrainian situation. We try to achieve the number of training personnel, at least for the level of all service members, in every single unit over 19%. Then we try to achieve the CLS level, at least of 90% of every single squad, and to achieve the level of combat medic at least 90% of every single platoon. But this is the lowest level of resilience. From my perspective, in my ideal world, every single gun operator should be trained at the level of CLS. Every single guy at the level of squad should be trained for the level of combat medics. And at the platoon level, you need to have 1 to 2 combat paramedics. And this perspective is based on the new time of medical evacuation, which break the human physiology we used to see in the coins. Environments. My first question is, what about corridors of mobility in Baltic countries? What is about the operational depth in Baltic country? Because based on Ukrainian experience, you should place your Role 1 MTF not closer than 30 to 35 kilometers to the front line, Role 2 not closer than 50 kilometers to the front line, and Role 3 MTFs not closer than 100 to 150 kilometers from the front line. So, do the Baltic countries have this depth of rear? If yes, okay, if not, who will be operational rear for the Baltic armies? And how the casualty will be evacuated to the operational rear, as well as what about civilian population? Do you have the plans what to do with civilian population? Because the theater of Baltic countries, there is urban terrains. In urban terrains, you'll have the ratio between non-combatants and combatants, I mean as casualties, 10 to 1. And it will dramatically increase overload of casualties for the medical service of the army. And the last but not least is C2 and communication. Do you have the secured communications lines? Do you have the cables, phones, or something like that? Because what I see here in Baltics is very close that I have seen last year in Taiwan. In Taiwan, they have very close situation because the island is approximately 400 kilometers from north to the south and approximately 150 kilometers from the west bank to the east bank. This is, like a brief parallels between our proposal for a medical planning process and troop leading procedures. Some limitations could be taken into account, the time constraints, patient's load, materials. some kinds of pathology, knowledge, intelligence, and you need to make at least 3 types of intuitive planes. I mean positive, neutral, and negative. And in case of the medical logistic could be properly done, it means that you need to train your medical personnel much more extended. So, from my perspective as anesthesiologist, it should match such a targets of extended TCCC, extended pause, and how to train them properly. And for the last point, I would say that we have a big experience how to properly train a big number of people during the short time period. What I mentioned, in LISCO, you will never have enough medical staff. So the only one solution is to train non-medical personnel up to the proper level of medical skills. And the idea is to change the academic-based training to the competency-based training. And the idea is the selection. So what we do at the moment in our tactical medical school, we train all the mobilized recruits at the basic army training. And we are searching for the individuals which are the best students, collect them and push them to the CLS level. At the CLS level, we are searching for the individuals with the best learning capabilities. Collect them and push them to the CMC level, as well as from CMC level to the combat paramedics level. I think I was in time. If you have some questions, please.
Question from the live audience online. Again, if you want to scan the QR code, we invite you to do so. And they're asking you, what would be the main challenges to training more officers in being medically efficient, if you will? Because that's something you spoke about a lot.
Thank you for the question. The biggest challenge is the ratio between trainers and trainees. Because for example, in Ukraine, we need to train approximately 1 million of staff for the ASM level, and you can calculate, so we need to train at least 33,000 on combat medics. So you need to be in the matching of trainees, training hours, and the number of trainers. And you should not exceed the ratio of 1 to 6 at the CM level, 1 to 8 at the CLS level, and 1 to 10 at the ASM level. And this is without refreshment. This is just for the first circle of training. So the biggest problem is, do you have enough experienced trainers?
Thank you very much. I think that's all the time that we have for. Let's give it up again for Denis Surkov. Thank you for your presentation. And now we're going to have a break until 4:35. If you want to get back here around 4:30, that would be great. Our next presentation is going to be about the role of special operation forces in the war in Ukraine, so you won't want to miss it. See you in a little bit.
And the beating of the drum.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for being here. We now have a special presentation on the role of special operation forces in the war in Ukraine, which is going to be given by Colonel Kirillo Burdeni, who traveled all the way from Ukraine. So please give it up. He is the Deputy Chief of G3 Ukrainian Special Operations Command. Welcome to the stage. Sorry. Oh my God. A note of housekeeping. We ask that you do not take videos or pictures during this presentation because of the sensitivity around it. Thank you.
Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. I'm Colonel Kirill Burdeni and I'm currently serve as the Deputy Chief of J3 in Ukrainian Special Operations Command. I have served in Ukraine's Special Forces for about 23 years, in positions ranging from ODA commander to a senior staff officer. Throughout my career, I have had a privilege to witness and be part of the transformation of our SOF from Soviet-style Spetsnaz units into a modern, NATO-oriented force capable of fighting and defending elements of what was once considered the Second Army in the world. The purpose of this briefing is to provide an overview of the role, evolution, and performance of Ukrainian Special Operations Forces during the ongoing Russian-Ukrainian war. I will focus on how our SOF adapted to the demands of full-scale conventional warfare, what capabilities proved decisive, and where we identified critical gaps and lessons for the future. When the full-scale invasion began in February 2022, Ukrainian SOF were organized and trained primarily for small unit operations, special reconnaissance, non-kinetic tasks, and resistance support. Within days, they found themselves operating in an environment of massive conventional combat, something no NATO or partner SOF had faced in recent decades. The war forced a fundamental transformation. What began as small, agile teams conducting cover missions quickly evolved into a force that could enable joint operations, integrate precision fires, and act across multiple domains: land, maritime, cyber, and information. Over the next 20 minutes, I will outline this evolution in 5 parts: the pre-war foundation and training of Ukrainian SOF, their rapid adaptation in the early months of the invasion, the evolution of roles and capabilities since 2022, the main shortcomings revealed by full-scale warfare, and finally, key lessons and priorities for the future. My key message today is this: Ukrainian SOF have demonstrated strategic value far beyond their size, but to sustain and expand that value, we must institutionalize what we have learned and continued building a force designed for multi-domain operations, not just irregular warfare. Before the full-scale invasion, Ukrainian Special Operations Forces had already begun a deep transformation. Our modern SOF structure was formally established in 2016, shaped by lessons from the war in Donbass and the annexation of Crimea. From the outset, the goal was to move away from the legacy of Soviet Spetsnaz and to create a force built on NATO principles: small, professional, and capable of independent operations in the strategic and operational levels. Organizationally, by early 2022, we had several SOF regiments, as well as dedicated training center established in 2016, responsible for preparing SOF operators. Within the command, specialized elements were focused on special operations, maritime operations, information, and resistance operations, each tailored to specific mission sets and operational environments. In terms of doctrine and preparation, the emphasis before the invasion was on irregular warfare, special reconnaissance, direct action, and support to resistance movements in occupied territories. Our training system was heavily influenced by Western methodologies, with strong support from NATO and partner nations throughout advisory missions, and multinational training programs. Despite this progress, several limitations remained. Our doctrine and force structure were designed for limited conflicts, not for sustained large-scale warfare. Integration with conventional forces and joint command structure was still developing. And due to resource and equipment constraints, modernization of ICR, communications, and sustainment systems was incomplete. So, by February 2022, Ukrainian SOF were professional, well-trained, and motivated, but optimized for focused operations rather than full-scale conventional combat. The war would force us to adapt those foundations very quickly. When Russia launched its full-scale invasion in February 2022, Ukrainian SOF were immediately among the first units to engage the enemy. In the opening weeks, SOF elements operated in highly dynamic and uncertain environments. Our units were dispersed across multiple directions: Kyiv region, northern border, southern and eastern Ukraine, performing a mix of strategic reconnaissance, deep raids, and direct actions against advancing Russian formations. During the defense of Kyiv, SOF detachments played a key role in disrupting Russian logistics and command posts, ambushing columns, and guiding precision fires. Their actions, often behind enemy lines or in contested area, helped delay the offensive and bought critical time for the mobilization and regrouping of conventional forces. As the scale of combat grew, SOF were compelled to adapt almost overnight. Operations that had once involved small teams and cover infiltration now required coordination with artillery, air defense, and intelligence assets. SOF transitioned from acting as independent tactical units to serving as force multiplier within combined arms operations. New mission sets emerged almost immediately: coordinated real-time targeting for long-range fires, directing UAV reconnaissance to enable precision strikes, supporting the integration of territorial defense units and irregular formations, conducted special reconnaissance and sabotage in occupied territories. This phase demonstrated not only tactical flexibility, but also a high degree of initiative and decentralization. Many small units operated autonomously under mission-type orders, a significant cultural shift from the Soviet-style command approach of the past. However, this rapid adaptation also exposed structural challenges. The absence of established joint command and control procedures made coordination with other services difficult. Communications were often improvised, logistics was strained, and the operational tempo was relentless. Still, despite these challenges, SOF managed to deliver disproportionate strategic effects during the most critical phase of the war. Their actions contributed directly to halting the Russian advance on Kyiv, protecting key terrain, and setting the coordination for later counter-offensive operations. In essence, the first months of the war proved that Ukrainian SOF were not only capable of surviving in full-scale conventional conflict, they were capable of shaping it. As the front line stabilized and Ukraine transitioned from defensive to offensive and deep strike operations, the role of special operation forces also evolved. By mid-2023, Ukrainian SOF had become a fully integrated component of joint and multi-domain operations, working closely with intelligence, electronic warfare, and precision strike elements. This transformation reflected both battlefield necessity and rapid institutional learning. First, the nature of SOF tasks expanded well beyond classical reconnaissance and direct action. Our operators took on a spectrum of missions that included deep operations in occupied and cross-border areas targeting logistic hubs, command nodes, and key infrastructure. Special reconnaissance and target acquisition for long-range precision weapons such as HIMARS, Storm Shadow, and ATACMS. Maritime special operations, particularly in the Black Sea and around Crimea, using innovative small craft and uncrewed system to strike Russian naval and coastal assets. Information and psychological operations amplifying the effects of battlefield actions through strategic communication and deception. Support to resistant networks in temporary occupied territories ensured continuity of operations behind enemy lines. Second, SOF became increasingly technology-driven. The integration of unmanned systems, real-time ICR feeds, and AI-assisted targeting greatly enhanced situational awareness and strike precision. Many of these innovations were developed in cooperation with private industry and volunteer technical communities, reflecting Ukraine's broader culture of battlefield innovation. Third, operational cooperation with partner nations deepened. International training, joining exercises, and intelligence sharing allowed our SOF to refine interoperability with NATO and partner SOF units, aligning tactics, communication standards, and mission planning processes. This development significantly increased the strategic value of Ukrainian SOF. They became not just elite tactical units, but enablers of national and joint power projection, able to shade the battle space, deliver effects deep in enemy territory, and influence both the physical and informational dimensions of the conflict. At the same time, this evolution revealed a growing need for institutional modernization, clearer doctrinal definitions of SOF's role within the joint force, stronger links with commands and departments responsible for technological development, digital transformation, and emerging capabilities, and a more formal system for innovation, experimentation, and lessons learned. In summary, between 2023 and 2025, Ukrainian SOF evolved from agile defenders into strategic operators capable of executing complex, synchronized missions across domains and providing Ukraine with unique asymmetric advantages against a larger adversary. While Ukrainian SOF have demonstrated remarkable adaptability and resilience, the experience of full-scale war also revealed several systematic shortcomings, both structural and doctrinal, that must be addressed to ensure long-term effectiveness. First, there remains a doctrinal mismatch between SOF's traditional focus and the demands of large-scale, high-intensity warfare. Before 2022, our doctrine emphasized irregular and special operations, small surgical missions designed to achieve disappropriate effects. In full-scale conventional war, however, SOF were often required to perform tasks far beyond that design, including holding defensive positions, supporting maneuver brigades, or compensating for gaps in conventional capabilities. This overemployment is not specialized roles, reduce SOF availability for strategic missions, and increase combat losses among highly trained personnel. It also risks blurring the distinction between special operations and elite infantry, something we continue to correct. Second, the situation with command and control has significantly improved. Earlier in the war, the absence of a unified SOF operational framework complicated coordination and mission tasking. Today, the establishment of more coherent joint command mechanism and improved coordination with the general staff and other services has enhanced SOF's capability to plan and execute missions at the operational and strategic levels. The challenge now is to institutionalize these gains and ensure joint integration remains consistent across all theaters. Third, despite improvements, integration with other domains, particularly cyber, electronic warfare, and information operation, is not yet institutionalized. Many successful joint efforts still depend on personal relationships and initiative rather than standardized procedures. Fourth, the training system must continue to evolve. Also, the SOF Training Center provides excellent operator preparation. There is a growing need for advanced leadership education, mission-specific training for joint operations, and specialized programs for maritime information and resistance operations. Fifth, sustainment and regeneration present ongoing challenges. High operational tempo combined with attrition among experienced personnel creates pressure on recruitment, selection, and requalification pipelines. Equipment modernization, particularly in C4ICR, mobility, and medical location, also remains dependent on continued partner support. Finally, while SOF have become a symbol of adaptability and courage, institutional development has not always kept pace with battlefield innovation. We still lack a formal mechanism for capturing lessons learned, testing new concepts, and integrating them into doctrine and training at scale. In summary, the war has proven the value of Ukrainian Special Operations Forces, but it has also shown that tactical excellence must now be matched by organizational maturity, doctrine, structure, education, and sustainability to ensure that SOF remain a strategic asset, not an emergency solution for conventional gaps. There is a number of lessons that have been identified. Some of them: joint integration is decisive. SOF proved most effective when operating as a part of joint systems synchronized with land, air, cyber, and informational domains. Future development focuses on dependencies, integration, and establishing common planning and common process. Information and psychological dimensions. The war demonstrated that influence operation can achieve strategic effects. SOF will continue to strengthen capabilities in information and psychological operations, including integration with cyber and electronic warfare. Adaptation and innovation as core strengths. Success often came from field-level innovation, new tactics, improvised technologies, and creative problem-solving. Building institutional mechanisms to capture and scale these innovations is now a strategic goal. People remain a decisive factor. The most advanced technologies mean little without well-trained, motivated, and resilient personnel. SOF development will emphasize leadership, initiative, and cognitive resilience. Doctrine, training, and education. Continuous doctrinal evolution and modernized training are essential. The training center will expand into a full-fledged education and development system to prepare leaders for hybrid and large-scale warfare. Sustainment and force management. Long-term effectiveness requires structured rotation, rest, and rehabilitation systems. Institutionalizing these processes will preserve combat readiness and retain experienced operators. Partnership as a strategic enabler. International cooperation remains fundamental, from capability development and training to operational synchronization. Expanding these partnerships is a key element of a way forward. In summary, the war was accelerated the evolution of Ukraine's Special Operations Forces from a tactical instrument into a strategic capability. The lessons identified are now shaping the next phase of our transformation toward a force that is joint, innovative, resilient, and fully interoperable with our international partners. That concludes my brief. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much. I think we have time for one really quick question. A point that you touched on multiple times in your presentation was the need to institutionalize more and more effectively special forces. Can you elaborate a little bit on what that means and what sort of challenges that presents for Ukraine?
I would say that first step of institutionalization should be development of new or revised doctrines, field manuals, change in education. Because as SOF, we have to work with conventional forces, mainly today. Because, like I mentioned before, in the past, special forces were used just for specific operations. Now, as full-scale invasion, we have to work in joint operations. And sometimes conventional commanders, they don't know how to employ special forces appropriately. And if we revise our doctrines, field manuals, our education system in our National Defense University, every conventional commander would know how to employ special forces. Because as I know, it's a problem in every country, because I have communicated with SOF operators from many countries, and they told me that it's the same problem everywhere, in the United States, in Baltic countries, in European countries. Understanding of special operations by conventional commanders is essential.
I think that's all the time we have for. Thank you very much. Please give another round of applause for Mr. Budini.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Up next, our second to last presentation of the day, A2AD in the Baltic Sea, how to close access to the region, will be presented by Tony Lawrence. Welcome to the stage, who is the Head Defense Policy and Strategic Head Defense Policy and Strategic Program at the International Center for Defense and Security. Thanks for being here. Please give it up.
So thank you, Elizabeth, for the introduction. I'm glad to be able to offer you a Canadian-friendly name to introduce. Thank you to the organisers too. It's a real honour to be here. So the title is Anti-Access Area Denial. I've not got my slide changer. Thank you. The title is Anti-Access Area Denial. This, of course, was a very fashionable subject in defence circles a few years ago. Our worries were about Russia using long-range weapons to prevent NATO allies from reinforcing the region and prevent us from operating within it. But that's not what I'm going to be talking about today. I'm going to be talking about our A2AD, so really about our defence posture. Defence postures, of course, have already been discussed a lot today. I'm not sure I have anything particularly new or original to add, but as they say at NATO, everything has already been said, but not yet by everybody. So I hope you'll indulge me with a little bit of reinforcement of messages that we've already heard. I'm going to take a defence policy perspective on this, rather than not a strategy perspective or a systems perspective. This is my background. I want to talk really about three issues, so capabilities, policy and doctrine, and thirdly, some acquisition questions. But first of all, it's perhaps worth reviewing the challenge. I think we can probably assume that any full-scale attack on the region is going to be preceded by a heightened hybrid campaign, as Russia tries to neutralize our advantages ahead of a full-scale conflict. I don't want to really dwell on this part, except to say I think that we need to get much better at dealing with it collectively with these sub-threshold threats. A recent instance in the region, so cable-cutting incidents in the Baltic Sea, drone incursions into Poland, around Copenhagen and Brussels airports, have shown us that we really lack many of the capabilities that we need to deny, by denial, hybrid attacks or sub-threshold attacks. And we also lack the collective will to deny them by punishment. And that lack of will worries me, that we would find it quite difficult to find consensus in the alliance as to when we should see hybrid attacks as a precursor of something more serious, and therefore when we should start to think about activating NATO defence plans. And as it seems unlikely that NATO is going to increase its posture in the region beyond forward land forces as they're currently constituted and beyond local forces, this kind of lack of decision-making in Brussels could be really fatal for us. And that's perhaps the weakest link in any defence scheme for the Baltic region. But for the sake of what follows, I'm going to assume that deterrence has failed, that Russia has decided to launch a large-scale military attack on NATO somewhere in the Baltic Sea region. We can expect with a high degree of confidence that this will be a multi-domain attack, and there will most likely be elements of the sort of campaign that Russia has prepared for decades to deal with NATO. So in other words, we can expect to see Russia striving to defeat NATO's air superiority, trying to take territory with concentrated armoured attacks. But as we've heard several times today, Russia is also learning from its experiences in Ukraine. It's not clear to what extent it will be able to implement the tactical lessons it's learned in its education programs, in its doctrine, in its equipment programs, in its training for a war with us. But it's reasonable to assume that in any future conflict, some elements of this will be present. So we'll also face less traditional forms of conflict, like dispersed infantry attacks and like FPV drone attacks. So these two pictures kind of reflect an ongoing debate about the meaning of the war in Ukraine, and especially the last 12, 18 months of the war reflect this debate. Some are arguing that what this signals is an entirely new form of warfare emerging, that our thinking about military conflict and about our preparations for a war with Russia are redundant and that we need radical reform. And you hear this message a lot from Ukrainians. Others are arguing that it's really too early to draw any kind of conclusions of this nature, that the apparent vulnerability of our traditional systems, our tanks, our aircraft, our warships, may have more to do with flaws in their employment rather than any inherent weaknesses in themselves, and that we shouldn't expect a NATO-Russia war to look like a Russia-Ukraine war. Second key uncertainty I'd like to mention is the degree to which NATO Europe can rely on the US. This is an uncomfortable question for old NATO hands, but the evidence suggests, at least it suggests to me, that we can no longer take for granted that America would take part alongside its European allies, either because they'll make a deliberate choice to do so, or because they'll be committed elsewhere. These two uncertainties complicate the challenge of defence, and they force us really to prepare for a range of eventualities, old and new warfare, with and without the Americans. In any case, it all starts with capabilities. So a multi-domain attack requires a multi-domain defence. And our shortfalls in capabilities are well known, and regrettably, they've been well known for rather a long time. And what Russia's war in Ukraine has done is underlined the need to fill these capability gaps rather than highlighting that they exist. So, for example, things like air and missile defense, long-range fires, ISR. And we're dependent on the Americans, at least in some degree, in all of these areas. I don't think we as Europeans necessarily have to replace US capabilities on a one-by-one basis or one-for-one basis, but we do need to think about how we as Europeans would fight if we were on our own, what a European way of warfare looks like. And once we fill these capability gaps, and we should be confident that we can do so because they're all reflected in capability targets that NATO has issued to nations on the basis of the new regional defence plans, once we've done that, we should be really confident of our ability to create a strong multi-domain defence. Russia's war has also highlighted the importance of technology in defeating mass, and things like multi-source intelligence, fusion, deep networking, digital support for decision-making are all things that have been important there and will be important for us as well. Again, we need to draw on this experience. But the most obvious technological advances in Ukraine, of course, have been in unmanned systems, and particularly in the air. NATO is really clearly behind the curve here, and not just technologically, but also in our thinking about operational aspects, about financial aspects, about the legal aspects of countering drones. The good news is that this problem is widely recognised. Steps are being taken at all levels to address it, so from industry startups and political level initiatives. But I do think we need to be wary here of duplicating effort, especially between NATO and the EU. Eastern Flank Watch was mentioned by Commissioner Kubilius this morning. Clearly that has to be very closely tied in with NATO's defence planning process. But capabilities are only part of the picture, and if we are going to secure the region, we also need to have a common understanding about how those capabilities are employed. NATO stresses that it's a defensive alliance, and that's obviously a good thing, but defensive thinking may disadvantage us in a war with Russia. When it comes to closing the Baltic Sea region, we can't simply defend a line, or to use AD terminology, we can't simply try to create impenetrable bubbles. We need to reach beyond those, or NATO forces need to reach beyond those lines, beyond that bubble, and to take steps to degrade our adversaries' capabilities to enter it. And that means we need to be ready to use long-range weapons to take out Russia's own long-range systems. So to take down the archers rather than wait for the arrows, as the jargon has it. To attack critical targets like staging areas, logistics, command and control, industry. Otherwise, we're going to be fighting with our hands tied behind our back. This is not, I think, a controversial point to make here in the Baltic region. Estonia has recently announced its intention to procure South Korean Chunmoo rocket launchers. They apparently have a range of about 450 kilometers. All three Baltic states are buying HIMARS with ATACMS munitions. Finland has ordered extended range air-to-surface missiles for its F-35s. Denmark is going to acquire long-range precision weapons for the first time, and this is something that its Prime Minister has described as being a paradigm shift in defence policy, Danish defence policy. That, incidentally, was a NATO capability target. But it's not clear that this need for offence in defence is accepted in political circles across the entire alliance. And we've seen during Russia's war in Ukraine the reluctance of some of our allies, some of the donor states, to provide long-range systems at all, and when they do, to set conditions on how they might be used. And it doesn't seem to me to be too much of a stretch to imagine that those kinds of concerns about escalation might also be raised in the context of a NATO-Russia conflict, particularly in the early days when the conflict might still be quite limited and its direction might still be unclear. And similarly, we have to wonder about whether the alliance will be ready politically to escalate horizontally, to draw fire away from the Baltic region, whether it be prepared to close bottlenecks in the sea, the Danish Straits, the Gulf of Finland, and what it might be prepared to do about Kaliningrad. And I stress that this is not about the military. Our armed forces, as we've already heard, are very well prepared to take on these tasks. This is about our populations and our political leadership. So I think the answer is that we in the region need to talk more about this. We need to do our best to ensure that political leaders across the alliance not only understand our perception of the threat and persuade them or to accept that perception, but also our understanding of the way that we deal with that threat. So the broader point is that building an effective defence is not just about military capability, it's all about strategic messaging and the battle of narratives. Excuse me. So 2 further key lessons from the war have been that modern war lasts much longer than perhaps we might have assumed in our planning of days ago, or olden days, and therefore the demand on resources may be much higher than we expected. And secondly, in a lengthy conflict in which both sides are trying to outdo each other technologically to gain advantages using technology, then systems can very rapidly become obsolete. And that points to a need, I think, for stocks, so ammunitions and other consumables, and second, for a need to harness innovation to deliver continual adaptation, to be able to secure advantages and deny advantages to our adversary. When it comes to stocks, between 2022 and 2029, Estonia will have spent about 5 billion euros on ammunition. That's about a third of Estonia's total defence spending. And that's important. Building stockpiles is important, but we also need to think about industrial arrangements to allow industry to rapidly ramp up production to meet our needs in times of crisis. So we need to be building in redundancy in peacetime in our industries. And at a more mundane level, it seems to me we need to be thinking a little bit more about standardization, which is something that NATO kind of prides itself on. Ukraine has found that even something so reasonably basic as a 155mm artillery shell can't be fired safely from every 155mm gun, which suggests that NATO has a bit of a problem with interoperability. The second requirement about harnessing innovation is something that receives at present a great deal of attention in defence circles, and this conference is no exception. It's very clear that our traditional defence development processes are not able to keep up with the pace of technological advance on the battlefield. So elements such as rapid prototyping, field experimentation, the acceptance of failure as part of the learning process will be important in our futures as well. But it's not necessarily the case that Ukraine's experience of rapid innovation during wartime, which is largely about problem solving, technologically and tactically, can be imported wholesale into our own systems, our own arrangements. Our challenge is to design processes that can deliver advanced equipment in sufficient quantity on day one, but that can also support the innovation that's needed to retain those advantages on day 30, day 60, day 90, and so on. And for all the talk about innovation in defence circles, I think we still need to think a lot harder about how to put those arrangements in place. We're certainly not there yet. We're going to need smart people to deliver the necessary changes from the bottom up, and I think that's good news for the Baltic states. The tech environment here is very strongly supportive of startups, but we're also going to need smart people in government to provide the overall framework to support innovation. So in other words, we're going to need governments, international institutions to take a more strategic approach to defence acquisition, the defence technology development, from education through regulation to acquisition and support for industry. And again, this is somewhere where we have still some way to go. The EU is doing very important work in this area. A couple of words of caution. So first of all, in attempting to set up our own defence arrangements for the region, we have to recognise that the Russian A2AD challenge hasn't gone away. Russia is still present in our region, most obviously in Kaliningrad, but also not very far across the borders in what used to be the Western Military District. And in a conflict, they, like us, will be striving for superiority and control. And that's going to lead to a messy and a complex situation on the ground. Also, referring to the A2AD debate of some years ago, many of you, I think, will be familiar with what I think was quite an influential report from the Swedish Defence Research Agency called Bursting the Bubble. And that concluded that Russia probably would not be able to create large, impenetrable A2AD bubbles. The capabilities it had to do so had been overstated, and in any case, there would be countermeasures that would be possible. And we too should not imagine that we can set up impenetrable A2AD bubbles. Our adversary, at least sometimes, is going to get through. And A2AD will only be possible at certain times, in certain locations, and in certain domains. And those will shift frequently. So here, aspects such as resilience, comprehensive defence, passive defence, again, things we've heard about this morning, will be important. And here again, we have a lot to learn from Ukraine. So defending this region against a near-peer, battle-hardened adversary is clearly going to be a demanding challenge, so politically, militarily, financially. But still, I would argue that we have good reasons to be positive. There are certainly differences across Europe about threat perceptions and the ways in which we should respond to the threat. But I would still argue that the consensus that erupted in 2022 about the nature of the threat and the renewed importance of defence still holds. And European states are taking big steps in the right direction. Defence spending is increasing everywhere. And this is especially the case in this Nordic-Baltic region. This is a region whose geography favours defence, and that has only been strengthened with Finland and Sweden's accession to NATO. All the states here understand the need for a robust response to Russia and understand the need for a military component in that part of that response. NATO, or the rest of NATO, is present in the sea, in the air, on the land. NATO has concrete and detailed plans for defending the region. It's issued targets for the capabilities required to implement those plans. And the EU is supporting the development of those capabilities and European defence industry to underpin this. So we should be confident in our ability to rise to this challenge. And if we do so, and demonstrate that we've done so, then we'll also build the deterrence in this region that will prevent such a conflict from taking place in the first place. Thank you.
So we have a bit of extra time to take some questions.
More than I expected.
Again, I encourage you guys to scan the QR code and we will track questions from the Slido platform. So you spoke a lot about positives, about the Baltic regions, about the Baltic countries. What is one positive trend that you are tracking or that you're seeing within the Baltic states in the defense industry?
In the defense industry? I think it's still early days in the defense industry. Although there's certainly a lot of energy there, which we can certainly tap into. More broadly, obviously defense spending is a key trend. The big test of NATO, of us for the next few years, is going to be the degree to which we implement those capability targets that NATO has set us, because those are fundamental. Without everybody playing their part, we are going to not have the defense that we want and deserve. So that will be one to look out for. But I think the signs are quite good. Consensus in The Hague was pretty strong on defence spending, and again, lots of energy. So I think we certainly do have reasons to be confident that we can overcome this challenge.
You also touched on countries needing to not think that they have impenetrable A2AD defenses. Recently, there's been a lot of talk about initiatives like drone walls across Europe that seem to be built around this idea that we can stop all drone targeting. Do you think that is a mistake that some countries are making in thinking that their countries are impenetrable, or that that industry is making at any level, and how do we solve that?
Sure. I think, again, it's inevitable that some of these things are going to get through. The cost of building a drone wall is really going to be prohibitive, and a perfect drone wall is going to be prohibitive. I think as kind of defense people, our responsibility is to make sure our populations understand this. Part of the impetus behind the drone wall has been driven by a worry amongst European populations that, whoa, this is a problem we didn't know about. How do we deal with this? And I think we need to be explaining to them what is the art of the possible, and to reassure them that most of the time we can be secure. The other aspect, of course, is resilience and passive defense. And again, we need to take big efforts to build those in order to deal with that part of the problem.
And what would you like to see more of when it comes to A2AD defense in Europe? What are we missing, or is there some challenges that need to still be addressed?
Definitely in the capability side, and I mentioned some of them, so long-range fires, air and missile defense, ISR, enablers like air-to-air refueling and strategic transport. But once again, these are not just about A2AD. These are general defense task items. And as I kind of tried to indicate, that the rather sad thing is that we still have these capability gaps so long after having identified them. It's a condemnation of the lack of seriousness we've paid towards defense in the kind of the previous decades that we find ourselves in this situation.
So how could we go about in the future, in closing remarks, how could we go about closing that gap? So would it be at an EU level? Would it be each country's responsibility to acquire these capabilities, or would it be better at a NATO level to address these challenges head on?
So I think very clearly for me, the answer is the NATO regional defense plans. When NATO announced these plans at Vilnius, it was very clear that this wasn't just a planning tool, but it was also going to be the basis upon which we would develop the capabilities that we needed for our defense. So provided that nations accept that they signed up to, that this is really serious business, we need to implement these plans, then I think we'll find ourselves in a good situation.
Well, thank you very much. Please give it up one more time for Mr. Lawrence. And now on to our last presentation of the day. Thank you for sticking around. This will be on the dual frontiers, strengthening Europe's defense industry while empowering Ukraine. It'll be presented by Arūnas Vinčius, who is the head of Unit for Ukraine Support and Military Mobility at the European Commission, Directorate for Defense and Space. Welcome, and please give it up for Mr. Vinčius.
Super. Just a test. This sounds nice, right? And thanks for the correct pronunciation of my surname. Super, no, really. Well, let me first thank you for inviting to this conference, and thanks for staying so long in the evening. Just to say a few words on what EU is doing on the programming, so-called Rearm Europe. Let me start with probably the biggest thing that you see. We have Commission has proposed to relax financial rules if the member states decide to spend the money on defense, and that had to do with basically asking the Commission to eliminate them from these financial restrictions. So the 16 countries requested that exemption, and if we get there by 2028 with the full spending what they are planning, that would amount to 650 billion euros. That's kind of not bad amount for the defense industry. And then in the next MFF, well, it's still to be negotiated, of course, but we have proposed the European Competitiveness Fund, where defense proposal is around 130 billion euros, and including also, not including, in addition, spending for military mobility, almost 16 billion euros. That in total, quite an impressive amount, which is to be complemented by so-called SAFE, Security Action for Europe, where 150 billion euros for loans were proposed by the Commission, and the 19 member states have decided to apply for these loans. Unfortunately, I don't have that numbers by what the member states have decided. Still, the deadline for them is 30th November to present the national plans, how they plan to spend it, and the negotiations are ongoing with the member states on probably most important part of these plans is the part how much will be allocated for Ukraine. I know that, well, we know that Ukraine is negotiating with member states also in opening the defense industry offices in the member states, where support via SAFE is an option. SAFE, this is a preliminary allocation, which by requested member states, well, some rather symbolic figures, but some are quite impressive. So hopefully, at least a decent amount of this money will be spent for the projects with Ukraine. As you may know, the SAFE is designed to finance certain categories of the products. In the first category, there is ammunition, missiles, artillery systems, ground combat capabilities, small drones, cyber, military mobility also. And the category 2, which comes with a bit of restrictions. First of all, requirement of European Design Authority. That's complex systems, which like air and missile defense systems, maritime surface underwater capabilities, the higher class drones, NATO classification 2 and 3, strategic enablers like strategic airlift, air-to-air refueling, and others. This probably, I should not put this slide here because it's like preaching to the believers. And it's pretty obvious that financing together, supporting Ukraine integration, financing Ukraine defense, it also helps us. And it's pretty obvious for the companies which are participating already in the projects with Ukraine and testing the equipment directly in the country. That gives them the better edge, technological edge. And also that is important for us that the so-called, let me name them, Axis countries are testing their technology on the Russian side. So that's a race we should win. We have also recently agreed a new program, which is basically based on the, it's not nice word, leftovers from the European Defense Fund. 1.5 billion European Defense Industry Program, which is for the next 2 years, should come into force by end of this year, where the companies from member states, European Economic Area, and Ukraine are eligible to apply for the grants. There is again limitation of eligible products. That is that the components originating outside the European Union or those named countries as, and Ukraine should not exceed 35% of the cost. Part of that program, there is a Ukraine support instrument with 300 million euros, which is, sounds not a very big number, but still idea is like it to work as a catalyst for the defense spending, for defense equipment. That allows financing of Ukraine companies. We are currently preparing the program for that, and Ukraine will be the ones deciding on the priorities, what they want to be financed. That it would include, if they would decide, would include the joint procurement, industrial ramp-up. While this, as I mentioned, this program will come into force by end of the year, and then we hopefully sometime beginning of next year will have member states voting to approve concrete Ukraine support instrument program for this. Then what else? Okay. Then it has been a lot of time mentioned several times the new initiatives which are still to be developed based on the European Defence Industry Program. And first of all, based on what we have seen in the last 3 years, because these are based on, let's say, on the Ukraine war with Russia. This is a major contributing factor. Of course, these initiatives still our proposals to the member states. A lot will depend how they see them, how they work together via the two legal avenues which are in the European Defence Industry Program. That is Defence Project of Common Interest and Strategic European Armament Plan. That's it. We hope this timeline is not fantastic, but hopefully it's not too late for the development of these programs. The idea, well, it was mentioned already by the previous speaker that this has to be decided or work together with NATO. Definitely, this is for member states and their participation in NATO. So we are providing the framework, money, but the decision is in a, let's say, in a different room. The Eastern Flank Watch shall integrate the air defense and counter-drone systems with a set of ground defense systems with maritime security in Baltic and Black Seas. It should be fully aligned with the EU's Black Sea Maritime Security Hub and NATO integrated command and control structure, and complementary to Operation Eastern Sentry, Baltic Air Policing, and the Forward Presence Forces. We are now in the very, let's say, early stages of that, on working on the programming documents. So let's keep fingers crossed everything works and the member states will, let's say, will buy into these programs. We have a small, I leave it. We have a small program which we have agreed with Ukraine Ministry of Digital Transformation in July, so-called Brave Tech EU, which also was presented in the downstairs, who has maybe had a time to pass by. The idea is very simple. We are looking for the innovators, for startups which are developing some crazy ideas how to tackle air defense, how to tackle the things which are flying in. Maybe looking a bit ahead of the future. The initial idea was like that Ukrainians provide us the interests, let's say the target areas. We look for the European companies who can work on this via the known for everybody these acronyms, boot camps and accelerators and so on. But looking how Ukrainians are developing, I think it will be more interesting for European ones to see the technologies, what they produce, what are being done in Kiev and other locations that Europeans can learn and adapt to the needs. Maybe if there are some good things found, we can do a bit more mass production on European side that could help Ukraine also. And that on the last part, to help Ukraine, just wanted to show some little figures, which does not seem a lot. Also, European Union is the main supporter now after US is basically withdrawn from the supporting war effort. We still have unfulfilled pledges of 32 billion. Hopefully member states will fill that in. The European Union is a major provider of tanks, infantry fighting vehicles, however, and other heavy equipment. However, if you look at the numbers not by money, but by exact how many tanks and the infantry fighting vehicles, these are amounted in several hundreds, and this is a really low amount needed. So it's a bit disappointing and frustrating on our side. Unfortunately, the Commission doesn't own any. Overall, European spending on Ukraine is 0.1% of GDP, while we ourselves are promising that we will spend, with the figures I said in the beginning, up to 5% of GDP. So the comparison of 0.1 and 5% is telling a lot, and not in a very good sense. Hopefully we can turn that a little bit better in the next year. And first of all, looking at the proposal, which probably I should not show, but it was already in the Politico, so if you read the Politico, you know what it is. The Commission is working on the initiative of the so-called reparation loan, which is based on, how to say, financial engineering of the frozen Russian assets, where a part of several parts, how this money will be divided or proposed to be divided, around 100 billion euros is to be proposed to finance military equipment for Ukraine based on Ukrainian needs and plans. There are two small caveats, so to say. One, first of all, is that money needs to reach Ukraine pretty soon. If the second quarter of next year is probably the deadline. However, there is another small thing, that this is a legislative proposal still politically not agreed. Should be agreed at the European Council in December. And it's a co-decision. That means the Parliament and Council has to agree together within 3 months. I have seen only one file like that in my life, that is on mobile charges, dropping charges at all for the consumers. I hope this will be treated slightly better. That's it from me. Thanks.
Thank you very much for that presentation. I think we have a few minutes for questions. I know on your last slide you mentioned there was 2 challenges to that money, and there was a question about what would be the fastest and most effective way for that to reach the Ukrainian armed forces. Do you have an answer to that question, or?
Yeah, the colleagues I'm working with, and my opinion is pretty straightforward. This is a European loan, so we have to take into account that European, basically, member states are lending the money to Ukraine, the repayment, and that's a different thing. But based on that, Ukraine should conclude agreements with producers or with member states, and the European Commission pays on that basis directly to Ukraine or to the producers or to the member states. That's the fastest.
Do you see that happening?
I hope so, and that's let's say the avenue we are pushing inside.
Okay, well, thank you very much. And to conclude today, thank you for those who have stuck around. Just some brief conclusions about the panels and all the presentations that we heard about today. A few points. We saw that from what our experts told us, if there was ever to be a war in the Baltics, in the region, it would look very different from what we are seeing in Ukraine. And NATO has different ISR and fire capabilities that do have the potential to eliminate Russian A2AD capabilities in the Baltics, but we must prepare and rehearse scenarios that are different from only what we're just seeing in Ukraine. In this regard, countries shouldn't stray away from their strengths in ISR and fires, but rather should improve their capabilities in ones that we've seen being fruitful in Ukraine, especially when it comes to locally produced weapons. This will be crucially important for smaller states located in the region. Militaries and societies must keep improving because the enemy we are facing is good at attrition warfare, and it will keep on being as such. In this regard, we should evolve from a ready-to-buy approach to developing what we will need to dominate the battlefield. And a reminder that it's not enough to just be focusing on your military. Societal resilience is also a huge aspect of Baltic defense as well. So thank you very much, and we will see you tomorrow. Thank you.